Hello and welcome to Get Good. In this episode, I am continuing work on Jane Sar. I popped her off of the rest of the base and the hair. It's one piece that I haven't glued in, just because it kind of gets in the way of you being able to paint a lot of the backside of her. So I've taken her off that again and just put her back with some blue tack, or in my case it's yellow, but it is a blue tack and an old paint pot for a holder. So I'm going to paint some non-metallic gold on her today, and I'm painting it like a very warm reddish gold. I have already painted a fair amount of it on her because I started her before I knew she was going to be a project for YouTube at all. So she had already had some work done on her, and that just means that some of the bigger areas where I was initially kind of testing out how I wanted it to look, they have already been painted. But I'll show a bit of like the colors and technique on this leg part. So just to quickly run through the colors on the palette that I will be using. I'm using Vallejo Burnt Red as the darkest color, and I'm saying as the darkest, but it's already been like base coated in Citadel Rhinox hide. So that is actually the deepest shadow color. It will be visible in the very darkest shadows, like kind of almost like a black lining. It's not black, but it's dark enough. But the next color I'm using is the burnt red, and I'm using the burnt red specifically because it's kind of an overarching theme, having the red in there. The armor has the shadows being kind of like desaturated red, almost like a bit of a purplish tone, which comes from the same burnt red, and the hair's deepest and darkest color is also the burnt red. So I am using the burnt red all over the model, actually, also for the lenses, but yeah. The next color I'm using is Citadel Mournfang Brown, and I will say that I actually end up not really using it at all. I used it on other areas, like on the chest and on the like head piece thingy, but because this area is quite small and the details are so intricate, I actually end up just skipping it almost entirely, because it wasn't very visible, and the value is very close to the burnt red, which means it's only really for like tonal distinction and variation, and when the area is that small, you can't really see it anyways. So I end up kind of almost skipping it. Next color in the transition is XV88 from Citadel. And next one is Baylor Brown from Citadel. Both of them are ochres. The Baylor Brown is a very bright yellow ochre, and the XV88 is also kind of it is a bit darker, but it is quite yellow too. So all the colors have quite a lot of warmth in them. Then I have a mix of the Bela brown and ice yellow, and I think that color is pretty important because it is a very warm, bright highlight color. So instead of just going straight into the brightest color, which is ice yellow, you kind of risk it being too pale looking, because you want a fair amount of highlight color showing, as it is going to be non-metallic gold, meaning you want to pump the contrast as high as possible. So I think the mix is pretty important. So those are the colors I'm using for the golds. I am starting out by covering most of the shape in the red, the burnt red. I am leaving out the like if I have a recess. You can see sometimes I'm tilting the leg, and I'll get back to that in a second, because that's an important part of how I'm picking out different like reflections and stuff. But what I was saying is I'm covering most of it in the red, just leaving like the kind of like a black line to have everything defined. Maybe you could just run the burnt red over everything, but when the details are very small, you also risk that it kind of drowns. So for maximum readability, I kept some of the Rhinox hide showing in the deepest recesses still. I will say this model, basically all of the model, but a lot of the details are very, very, very small. And I'm using an Artist Opus size 00 brush, and even the brush has some wear, which means it's even smaller because it has lost some of the bristles. So it's even smaller than a new 00, and it's fine for the job, but I wouldn't want a brush much bigger than this because you really can't get to the details. So I would definitely recommend having a brush that size. 00 is perfect for me because it is small, so it does not hold a lot of paint, which is kind of important in the sense that you don't want to ever like overload the brush and risk it flooding the area, which means if you have too much paint and you don't wick enough paint off, you can see I'm using my thumb sometimes. If you don't get enough of the color off, when you touch the brush to the model, it will kind of flood the area. It's not like the end of the world, it just means that you have to redo it. And I really want to avoid that, because especially as you progress through the colors in the transition, it is kind of slow work, and you have to be like very neat and very precise. So ending up like having to undo a lot of your work because you overloaded the brush is not a nice thing at all. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm using such a small brush. Also, they tend to keep like the tip sharper for longer, for me at least. And I mean, you need the sharpest of tips, really. Some of these edges are, so tiny that, it's like a single stroke in width. So I recommend that. I'm using, I think I was on 2.5 times magnification for this part. I usually go for 2, I think. And I don't remember exactly. I think because I remember trying out 3.5, which was too much for me because I couldn't really get that close to the model. As you change magnification, you you kind of need to go even closer to the model as you go up in magnification. And there is kind of a cutoff point where you can't really go any closer because your head is all the way down to the model, almost. So I remember trying that one out and it didn't really work for me. So I'm pretty sure I changed for 2.5. And I mean, you can go for no magnification if you have great eyes. I mean, but I can't catch details that small, and I really want to do them neat, not only because of a smooth blend, because normally that is my reason for magnification, is that if I can blend something out under the magnification, it will look pretty good in hand. But here it's actually really a matter of making sure that like every volume is readable, which can be, because you can see the face on that, I guess, kind of knee cap protecting thing. The face is small. It is so small. It is like a third of her own face or something. So painting eyebrows on it and like painting in an eye and stuff like that it is just so incredibly small. So magnification and a super tiny brush is really the way to go. Here you can see I have moved up in brightness of the colors, and I'm kind of, I almost want to say blocking in, but because the areas are so small, I'm not truly blocking in. I am doing it as neatly and like trying to get a bit of a transition going already when I'm going through the layers. But you can see where I'm picking my initial shine points. So that is back to why I'm sometimes tilting the mini. It's because when I look at the leg as we see it here, straight on, I'm not really seeing it from the angle you would when you hold the miniature. So her posing is that the leg is outstretched and pointing backwards to the point that it's almost pointing entirely downwards. So non-metallic metals, they really only shine because of contrast, which means if you don't go from very dark to very bright, they don't shine. Realistically, if this leg was pointing all the way down or facing the ground, it would be lit like not a lot. Because the main light is coming from like top and then a bit left, you can see how the chest and the arm and the side of the face is very bright, and the left side of the stomach too. Because the light is coming there, it would hit the ground a bit and bounce from there, but it not enough to make it like a huge shine point on the metallics there. That means though that I would have to keep the leg armor mostly dark. And keeping it like mostly dark means when you're holding the model, you can't see any of the details. So this is a case of me basically taking artistic license, and even though it's probably not entirely the correct way of painting reflections on this, I'm actually doing it anyways because I wanted to like the details to be visible. I'm not taking the overall like the trim and everything as bright as I've done on, for example, chest and shoulder or the front of the headpiece. So the overall look of that, the golden leg, will be a bit darker, but I am taking some of the points up to very bright still. And that's why I'm kind of tilting it sometimes, because I'm trying to see, okay, what can actually be seen from the front of, like when you're watching or looking at the model from like the intended viewing angle. And then I'm kind of putting my brighter reflections right there as they are seen. So that's why the edge of like the lip of the right above the face on the knee has a lot of brightness, and the top of the face also gets a big shine point there. When I'm saying big, it's actually rather small. But yeah, that gets a bright shine point too. And then just as you go all the way down the foot, on the wrist of the foot, you have a big bright spot there too. And then of course I'm putting a bit of light here and there just to make it like everything more readable. But those are really the areas I take very bright. And yeah, as I said, it might not be the most realistic, but it is really a matter of both having some realism and also being able to read the material as actually gold and something shiny. So that's why I'm tilting it a bit back and forth, also from side to side, because I want to make sure that it is like lit from the right angle, because it's really important to have both light and shadow visible. And one of the things you do to make the non-metallic effect come through is you have that contrast be very high. So you kind of pick a direction where you put your main light running through I'm interpreting the leg kind of as like a bit of a complicated cylinder, I guess. So as the leg is outstretched, it's basically a cylinder shape, which means the light runs down the length of that cylinder, which is why I'm following the top of that knee lip, then the top of the head, and then it runs down the shin down to where the foot starts. And that is where I'm putting my main light. Then I fade it out to either side, and I will be putting a bounce light on the like the shadowed side, which is like the side hidden to the left, as we're seeing right now. I won't be painting much of that or almost any of that here, but it's just to explain that I'm going to put a bounce light there, because in hand you will be turning the model a bit, of course, when you see it. And so when you're only seeing the model on a photo or whatever, you can get away with having the shadow sides basically not painted at all. But yeah, when you hold it in hand, you will be turning it a bit and viewing it from different angles. So it doesn't really work out if you just completely forgo putting light on like another angle. Well, it will look a bit weird, at least. So now you can actually see how I've picked it out, and it already begins to shine a bit, huh? And you could stop here if you wanted to, actually, because, well, you would refine a bit, but you don't actually have to take it much brighter if you like to have it more shadowed. I just want it to be, well, shinier than it is now. Even though this would probably be a bit more realistic. I just really like to have a really bright spot here and there, so it is very shiny looking. I've picked this color for the gold, which is a bit different from my normal recipes. I kind of have two go-to recipes, and one is like a warm gold and one is a desaturated gold. In the warm gold recipe, these colors are present also, but I'm not using the burnt red at all in that recipe. I'm going with the Rhinoxide base, and then I have Mournfang brown on top of it. So that recipe will show a lot of Mournfang brown, which gives a nice and warm and brownish looking gold. Another recipe I'm using quite often is on top of Rhinoxide, I use English and Japanese uniform from Vallejo before going into mixing ice yellow in. That is more desaturated because both of those are kind of greenish ochres, as opposed to XV88 and Balo Brown both being quite yellow. But I actually decided on this one that I wanted very warm gold because I wanted it to have red in it. And I wanted that because of like the hair has red, the lenses have red, and I knew I wanted kind of a reddish shadow color to the armor. So to tie everything together, I wanted a more reddish gold. And that's a lot of words to say. You can actually change the look of your metallics quite easily, because having your base tone, or maybe like the darkest mid-tone, have that be a specific color, and then choosing your ochres to kind of be within the range of that, or in this because it's gold, your ochres. But it could be a steel recipe too. So if you wanted a more greenish steel, you would use a desaturated green as your base, and then you would start with or layer up with like a bit of green within your medium grays. Not a lot, but a bit of it, and you could go with a very, very bright green off-white highlighter, and then you would have a greenish steel, and it's basically what is going on here too. So because of the warmth from Bela Brown XV88, I can have a warm shadow or first mid-tone if you want in the red, and it will look very warm and reddish. So yeah, you can play around with. I've done very green gold recently, which follows kind of the same principle of having your ochres complement green, being in a bit of a greenish tone, and then having a green base to work from. Works very well, and it is something that is worth remembering, because that means you can, like, your steel or your gold or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be like in a set tonal range, in the sense that of course it has to be like ochre if it's gold, because you want it to be like golden looking, but you can tint it quite a lot and then still have it show up as gold. It is a bit hard for me to keep the model in focus all the time because of the weird angles and having to move it a bit back and forth. You can see that I've gotten to the point of refining some areas, and here you can see I'm doing a very fine and sharp line, trying to get because I also want to say that the details on the model I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it has a mold line going through the leg. When you cut it from the sprue, you have to clean that up, which means, because the details are so small, it's very hard to not accidentally cut into something or sand too much or whatever. So the area itself is a bit rough. It's not very visible, and you won't really see when you have it in hand. I will say you actually won't see at all. But because it is like, I use magnification, and we have to remember here, also on the video, it is heavily zoomed in, more than you would see it in real life too. But yeah, because the area is a bit rough, I have to be really careful with where I want those lines to be, and yeah, just be really neat. So you can see when I'm kind of blending out, here I'm doing it, for example, going from an area that is like one step darker than what I have on the brush, and then I start kind of dotting or scratching within the area I want bright, and then as soon as, because I'm basically taking off a bit of paint when I dot it onto something, and then when I've dotted it there for a couple of dots, then I can start kind of scratching or like making a stroke from the area that is a bit darker and dragging them up into the lighter area. I did a bit of a cut there because it was me refining a bit and going up through the color. That means I've put on Bela Brown on basically all of the areas that I want to be Bela Brown, and you can see on the top of the that screaming face where I'm dotting right now. I already put a bit of highlight color there, and the same on the trim on the knee lip or whatever. And now I'm doing kind of the same. You can see how I'm blending it out. It is small, this. so small, which means it's hard to really do like any kind of stroke. So I'm kind of left to stipple it, which means you can see how every time I put my brush on the palette, I'm kind of swirling it a bit more, because that means I make sure that the paint I have in the bristles are fairly thin. It will be 50-50 water to paint at least. Sometimes it is a bit more watery. Don't get too hung up in it. I'm just saying that you don't want it to make a strong mark at all. So if the paint is still making a strong mark when you put it on the Mini, add a bit more water to it, because the mark should be soft. Not like a full glaze at all, but it should be rather soft. Because that means you can, the way I'm painting is I don't really wash the brush too much. It's probably also why they see some wear, but it means that when I'm kind of going back and forth between two colors, let's say the Balo Brown and the next step, which is the 50-50 mix Balo Brown and Ice Yellow, I will be dipping, for example, in the mix as I'm doing now, swirling a bit, making sure it is rather thin, wicking off some excess on the thumb. Now I'm dotting it right where I want the brightest shine to be. So the first point I touch is right where I want the brightest shine to be. Then I deposit a bit there, see that the mark isn't like too big, and I also test that it won't flood the area. And then I kind of paint from there outwards. So I kind of painted in that tiny line. And that's kind of how I always do it. Just to make sure, you can see, again, I'm painting right where I want it to be the brightest. And then as I'm depositing some paint there, it leaves less on the tip of the bristles, which means the marks are going to be softer. Because what is defining how soft a mark is some different things. One of them is how much paint is in the bristles. One of them is how thin is your paint. And one of them is how much pressure you put on the brush and the bristles. So the softer you press with the tip of the brush, the less paint it deposits. And the more thinned down the paint is, the less pigment is within the paint, because it's diluted, which means, yeah, it makes a softer mark if it's thinned down more. And then of course, as you paint with it, you deposit some of the paint every stroke. And then when you don't have any more paint on the bristles, it won't make any marks. And then of course, another factor is if it dries out on the bristles, you can't really make any marks, of course, either. So yeah, those are kind of the factors. And getting comfortable with how hard you should press the brush, how much paint you want in the bristles, and where you want to put the first deposit of paint is really up to oneself to find out what is the preferred method, I guess. I've just found for me the way is, you can see here again, I'm putting it where I want the brightest spot, then I'm going to one side and then to the other side. That just means that I won't set the brush down and have a big bright spot in an area where I didn't really intend to have brightness. And here you can see as I've deposited paint and it leaves less of a strong mark, I go into like that small area that was a bit darker than I wanted it, and I kind of scratch over it with the brighter color that has, well, less power because it's already been deposited some. Again here, dot in the top where I know I want it to be the brightest, then dragging a bit downwards and then going back up and reinforcing that area. And I'm saying reinforcing to something that is incredibly small. You can see the size of the gem on the forehead and like eye lenses, and the details down here on the shin is like even smaller than they are on the head and chest and stuff like that. So it really is very, very, very small, and I understand how you might not be able to get exactly this level of detail, and this is more for like educational purposes in the sense that I have started projects on Patreon where they are more in the vein of you can actually follow along, which means it is a progression, and I show like some and in some cases a lot of all the things you would need to finish the paint job. On this one, as I said, it was started before I even decided to do YouTube and Patreon videos. So of course I couldn't really show those steps anyways, but also I will say this is probably not the best model for like a paint along unless you are already like having a fair amount of brush control, and I will say general like interpretation of light on volumes and stuff like that. It is probably best if you at least have heard it before. But that's not to say that you couldn't learn from this, in the sense that you can see everything I'm doing, and I am explaining how and why. It's just following along with something minute as this is not that easy and can be a bit frustrating if you can't really like get to the same level of detail. I will say though, getting magnification will probably help quite a lot in the pursuit of like better brush control, simply for the fact that you can see the details so incredibly well, which means you're kind of forcing yourself into being even more precise. And it is something we have talked about in the community some, and I will say, even though that it might feel like it's not that big of a deal, even taking your lines, like the size of, for example, that line I'm putting right there, even just cutting that down with like 20% from what you're normally doing means like a big step up. It might not seem like much because your line work is already like very small, but because you're at the scale we are, just even gaining like 20% of that would be a big step up. And magnification really helps with that because you can see everything that much clearer. Actually, I want to come back to that line I put on the forehead. It is pretty important to have it there though, because you show that there is the rounded shape goes into the very flat shape of that knee guard, lip, or whatever. And putting that line there really defines it, especially because you want to put like a very rounded highlight, like the dot just below it. You want to put that in, so instead of it going like tapering into a shadow, you want it to go into that kind of bright line to separate it from the flat area. So it is actually quite important to get it in there, if at all possible. Now I'm at a stage where I'm all the way up to brightest colors, and I'm really looking for, okay, what looks neat and what doesn't. Do I need to blend out something, or do I have to like tweak a reflection a bit, making it a bit brighter and or even darker? Because when normally for me, at least the process is when building these non-metallic reflections, I kind of know where I want them, and I use the first mid-tone to kind of, I want to say, almost sketch them in. It's not in a sketchy way, so I will do it very neat, but it just means that from that first mid-tone layer, I can already kind of see, okay, is it in the right spots, at least. And if I'm happy with that, then I start bringing them up in value. But because I'm not like sketching all the way, it can be a bit hard for me to like gauge the exact size and how bright I want them. So when I'm building up brightness, I sometimes will need to kind of like have them be bigger in area. So even though I know how bright I want to take them, sometimes they're simply not big enough. So I have to go back and just make them a bit bigger. So I am constantly reviewing and going a bit back and forth, and that means sometimes I will have to go back and just fix something that isn't exactly bright enough for what I want it to look like, which is fine too. It's not a big deal, but it's just sometimes you have to go back and tweak it a bit. So this will be the end of this video. I hope you have enjoyed watching me render these gold intricate details, and she has a lot of gold trim left on her, but all of that is just basically more of the same of what I've been doing here. So yeah, that is all for this video, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye bye.